Hello and welcome to the Healthcare Today podcast. Our guest today is Ted Fischer, Chief Executive of Ageless Innovation, a tech firm aiming to improve the lives of older adults through the power of play. As health systems grapple with aging populations, staff shortages and rising demand, non-pharmacological ways of wellbeing support are being sought out. This is what led Ted to explore the potential of robotic companion pets. Today we're talking about why technology designed to bring joy may have a more serious role in modern care than many may assume. How did Joy for All companion pets come to be? What was that initial moment of realization that a toy could have such a profound effect on older adults?
I joined Hasbro, a company, the largest toy company in the world, back in 2015 with a mandate to lead this new innovation team. And we were looking at, what are the larger markets that we might serve? And we chose health and wellness as a way to think about what Hasbro was great at by engaging people and making meaningful connections and gamifying things. And as we explored that, we found a couple things. There was some unintended end users of products that had been created mostly for young girls that were, mom's not buying it for their daughter, but buying it for an aging loved one. And as we dug into that insight, we found a couple of things. Hasbro had never made a product specifically for older adults, but we found there were two things. One, older adults unequivocally wanted more fun, joy, and play in their life. So no matter who you spoke to, they wanted more. And then two, there was this incredible need for interactive companionship. And that was really the core insight. And so as we did months worth of research with this population, I would say the crystallizing moment was we brought this group into a place called the Fun Lab at Hasbro, which is a really cool place, best place to work. And usually it's filled with kids, who are looking at new concepts or new toys or new, environments. And, behind the glass walls, a bunch of designers and engineers taking notes on what they, how it all works. And we brought in a group of very different folks one day, wheelchairs and walkers included. And we noticed this, the woman who works and had worked at, Fun Lab for like 15 years running and said, later in the day, she goes, "This is the best day we've ever had here." And, I thought about that a lot after, sort of that moment. And it finally, sort of dawned on me. So the lightning moment was when we are in that environment and kids go in and run to play, like there's an expectation of play. Like that's what they expect to do. They expect to have toys and they expect to go do it. The unanticipated joy that was obvious in the group that we brought in was not only that they were having fun and really gravitated towards this idea of animatronic and interactive pets, but they were so excited that someone was thinking about them in this way as people who should be playing, as, something like, 'cause, quite frankly, as a society, we don't treat them that way. We give them the old, you got to this age, you work your whole life to get to the place where you can play more. And then they get there and we say, "Oh, you're too old for that," and so that's really been, in terms of how we came up with this concept. We showed them a whole bunch of different things that day and other days, and they all gravitated towards this idea of an interactive companion. And so that's when the Joy for All companion pets were born.
Now, in 2018, you made the bold decision to spin the company out of Hasbro to focus entirely on older adults. What was the driving force behind that leap, and how did the separation occur?
So it's a couple things. I mean, one, the company loved what we were doing, and as most things in a big, $5-6 billion company, it's really hard to be a small, sort of brand, going from zero to some number that's meaningful. And so that was one, of the challenges. Two, when we were conceiving of this, we had a team, we had the budget, we had all these things. And then all of a sudden we became a brand. And when you become a brand at Hasbro, you run into a different machine. And in that machine, you're competing with My Little Pony and Transformers and Monopoly and Mr. Potato Head and Play-Doh for marketing dollars and things of that nature. And so, it got harder and harder to sort of carve our way and to make sure that we were getting the budgets that we need and those type of things. And for my team and I, it was getting harder to focus exclusively on this population that we'd all become so passionate about because there were other things that we were being asked to tackle. And so, in 2017, I started the conversation with a couple of senior executives about how I really thought that this had legs and there was an opportunity here, and that quite possibly it could grow faster and become more meaningful and have more impact if we were living outside of the walls of Hasbro and somehow maintained, a relationship that benefited us both as we grew. And so management was really receptive to that. They really hadn't done any brand spinouts like this in the past. So we came up with, sort of a formula that worked. And I and a few of my team members left Hasbro. We started Ageless Innovation, and then we acquired 100% of the brand and the assets of the Joy for All product line. So since 2018, we've been running it as our own company focused 100% on this population. And Hasbro has maintained, we have a very close relationship with them as witnessed by the fact that we now reimagine their iconic games for older adults as well.
The product range that you have is backed by more than a dozen published research papers. For our listeners who might be a bit skeptical about this whole idea, can you talk us through what the clinical evidence shows and what the measurable impacts of someone living with loneliness or dementia might be from these products?
So as you just said, the two real need states that we've seen the most impact are loneliness, isolation/depression, and then, Alzheimer's and all forms of dementia. And in both of those cases, we now have at least a handful of, if not two handfuls of published research on each. I'll give you a few examples. So we just had a really exciting one-year research project done in Florida. And they were giving our pets to dementia patients that were admitted to the hospital. And what they found was that one, their quality of life improved. So sense of purpose, optimism, all of those things that they're looking for as they're helping their population. But they were, discharging sooner and readmitting at a much lower rate than those that were not. So they did a controlled study and those that did not. So, so that's a specific setting, obviously. But then as it relates to, people who are either living in community or living independently that are either lonely or isolated or dementia, we've seen things like obviously a reduction in the feelings of loneliness, but improvement in quality of life as, measured by sense of purpose, as measured by ability to communicate, as to interact, all the things that people are looking for to make sure that people stay socially connected and happy. And so these studies dug into, there's all sorts of loneliness scales that are used as the UCLA scale. There's another, a De Jong scale of loneliness that people use. And they really are measuring from a baseline how people are feeling at any given time based on what they're interacting with. And so our pets have been really validated, to significantly improve many of those conditions.
Talking about scales, you've previously mentioned a powerful study in New York that saw the average pain scale drop from a 7 to a 2 over the course of a year. And this has been cited as being partly down to these robotic pets. How can you explain how a robotic pet can reduce physical pain?
I mean, I'm not medically trained, so I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer, but I can tell you what the results of the study showed. And Greg Olson, who's the state director there, often cites this example. But I think if you're a 7 or 8 on a pain scale, your chance of having an emergency room visit is imminent, right? Between 8 and 10, it's for sure. Between 7 and 8, I think it's fairly certain that you're about to be at that level that you believe that you need to be admitted. And so, I think I say this all the time, not being medically trained, but I think when people are happy, they feel better. It's sort of just an anecdotal part of life. Like it's true for me, and I see it with others. And I think what our pets do is they bring great joy to people. Especially lonely people who are either living alone, don't have social companionship, don't have regular interaction with, a lot of people or their family. And our pets are filling that need. And I think, when you're interacting with one of these pets, you forget about some of the other things that maybe are, chronic conditions you're dealing with. And I wish I could explain it more medically, but that's the best I can do.
Completely understand. You've secured formal recognition from major health bodies like the US Centers for Medicare, Medicaid Services, and the NHS here in the UK. Can you talk a bit about what that process entailed and how did you translate anecdotal evidence and research into the formal language and proof that these large systems usually require?
And we have great relationships in both of those areas. And in 2020, as I think when we were approved by CMS, which is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid in the US, and really that process is, it can be long and arduous to get approval, especially for what I call a non-traditional intervention, right? So typically it's a drug or some type of DME or but for a non-traditional intervention, it could be a pretty long path to prove these things. So one, we did have a lot of those research studies that we talked about earlier that had been published and we never paid for any of that research. So every one of the 15 or so studies that we've done have actually been funded by clinicians or academics that, saw the anecdotal evidence and then wanted to prove the case. And so as we embarked on the CMS approval, we had one specific Medicare, Medicaid, dual eligible plan in Minnesota that had been, had seen the impact of our pets and really thought that this was an affordable solution that could solve a lot of problems. And they became our champion. And so being partnered with them going through that process made it a lot faster and a lot more legitimate for us because it was an actual health body that was saying, no, these things are having this type of impact. And they were bringing the research forward. And so it took us a couple of years, but that it can take 5. I mean, it can take, it can be a longer process. And then with NHS, we've had some great partners in the UK, a lot of care homes that have, again, been sort of the champions of the impact that our pets have had on their residents and helped us. And we most recently have been working with them on a pretty large program where over 1,000 pets have been distributed over the last year.
You've previously been quoted as saying that you're not trying to fool anyone. I think that's clear. But how do you navigate the line between creating a realistic, comforting experience and then ensuring there's no deception, especially for someone with cognitive decline?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So one, every one of the products that we've ever made have been designed not just for older adults, but by older adults, right? So we include them in every step of the process. Many of the features, if not all the features that we have in our pets, have been told to us by older adults, things that were meaningful to them, like the fact that our cat has this purring technology called VibraPurr, because they told us that the tactile sensation when a cat purrs, it actually vibrates, and that's a really important thing. So those type of cues helped us along the road of saying, okay, so what we heard early on was realism and affordability were probably the two most important things. And so as we went down that path, and by the way, I was no expert in, dementia or, what others. And I had a grandmother who actually had been down that path. So in my own, sort of single case study. But what if, we found out is that it's really not our reality to determine. And so, we're never trying to tell somebody this is a real dog or a real cat, but I'm also not trying to tell anyone what their reality is. If you're a person-centered design, which we consider ourselves to be a very person-centered design, you can't paint a broad brush of who is where in their spectrum or their, along their continuum. And so, what we've tried really hard to do is say, listen, here are the things that we have seen that these pets are able to bring to folks in these different need states and conditions. And it may or may not be right for you or for your loved one, depending on who's making the decision. But certainly it's not our decision. And so, when we think about fooling someone, what I know for sure, people tell me all the time, well, wouldn't it be better if someone could have a real pet? I said, listen, if a real pet is the best solution for somebody, I'm 100% for it. I think that's great. What we have learned is there's a lot of people in this population over time, whether it's residential or residence-based, can't have pets, or health-wise can't have a pet, or a lot of people don't want to get a new pet and outlive their pet. Like there's a lot of things that have gone into it. We have an alternative that we've tried to make as engaging and as fun as possible. And we've, now over 750,000 adoptions later, I can tell you there's a population who have really benefited from our pets. And so I'm never going to tell you they're better than a pet. I'm going to tell you that whatever is best for the person that needs what they need is best for them. And it may be this and it may not be this.
You have also previously described the pet as a bridge for human connection. Can you explain a little bit more about that statement?
Especially early on, a lot of the, cheeky comments or criticisms, were around, were we trying to replace human interaction? And certainly that has never been our intent. Our intent has been to, provide, again, this joyful companionship. But what we've seen now over 10 years, and a lot of the research has said, and even the study that I pointed to at the Florida hospital that I was talking about, is, if someone has dementia and Alzheimer's, there's oftentimes some really difficult transitions communications, sundowning, and what we've seen is that our pets have taken a lot of the pressure off of what can be very tense situations between loved ones or caregivers and aging loved ones. And it is, created this bridge that allows communication because as opposed to, a really difficult transition that may cause agitation or something else, and just coming and saying, we're moving to the other room or whatever it is, they say, oh my gosh, Gladys, how's your cat? How is Fluffy doing? And so the conversation starts and then it becomes about the pet and all of a sudden the communication starts. And, so and now we've seen, thousands and thousands of this type of outcomes where, it, and caregivers tell us more than anyone that, hey, my mom was non-communicative in her community living. She'd been there for 2 years, no friends, didn't talk much, didn't, interact with people because she's just never been that person. She's never been the gregarious, get out there and, we gave her the cat hoping it would keep her company, but what it ended up doing is made her the center of attention. So she didn't have to become this gregarious person. People came to her. They wanted to know about the cat and play with the cat. And so all of a sudden now she brings it to dinner and she brings it to bingo and she's in, and like she's talking to everyone, So we've heard that story so many times. And so, in my wildest dreams, I don't think any of us here could have anticipated that, this simple technology product would have that type of impact, not just on the end user, but on those around the end user, creating this bridge for connection. So we've loved every story that gets told in that bar.
You've expressed the hope that companion technology will become more normal, but you're very deliberate about the form that it takes. What is it about animals in particular, that's so critical to its success? And as you've just spoken about, to its acceptance over, say, a humanoid form, particularly for this age group?
I wouldn't bet against humanoid forms, in the future for sure. I think they're coming whether we're ready or we're not. But you know what? I think that especially this, and this population is shifting, right? So in the U.S., 11,000 people a day turn 65, right? So I'm almost there. So I don't consider I consider myself pretty tech savvy and understanding. So at the other end of the spectrum, at 85 to 100, whatever the age is, those folks just didn't have as much of the tech, sort of in their lives. And so, I think there's this commonality to pets and to people's experiences and their memories. And the pet, to us has been, especially the most common cat and dog. We obviously have a bird as well, but that form factor, I think, has been part of why we have 750,000 of them, adopted out there. What I love most about our product is that you don't have to, give the end user the 7-page manual on how to use it. They take it out of the box. They, someone gifts it to them. They name it, whatever they name it, and the sort of the love affair starts and the magic starts. There's a great story that's been publicized pretty well about a veteran. And so we went to one of the VAs here, and I live in Rhode Island, and so we went to the VA here, and this guy, Ray Hool is his name, phenomenal guy, has served our country for many, many years. And in order to move into the VA, he had to give up his cat, who he's had for over 10 years. And his cat's name was Franklin. And we went and we gifted him an orange tabby cat, which Franklin was an orange tabby cat. And honestly, like I get chills even thinking about the moment that we gave it to him and the tears welling up in his eyes and his telling a story about how much he has missed this cat. And now he has his own Franklin, another Franklin, that's filling a void for him. To me, that story tells it all.
As we've spoken, it's been clear that there's been a lot of unintended or unexpected moments that have happened along the way. Now, after nearly a decade on this journey, what continues to surprise you the most about the impacts your company's products have had on individuals, families, and by extension, healthcare systems?
I think, we continue to be inspired. We spend a lot of time reading testimonials and reviews and letters that we get as a team just to make sure we stay grounded in what's so important about what we do. So I think, I'm continually surprised by the impact that our, these pets have had. One of the more exciting things is, there's such an emphasis now on caregivers and shortage of caregivers and how that's going to get worse over the next decades. And so the impact that our product has had on helping caregivers who are providing amazing care for aging loved ones, whether it's professional or family members, the respite that we're giving, the ability for them to use this as a bridge, that's continued to be exciting.
As you mentioned, healthcare systems are increasingly under pressure. Is there something further down the line with the product development that you could add to help with that? So perhaps integrating AI, perhaps integrating in the same way that an Apple Watch can check for blood pressure and heart rate and stuff. Is that something that you would consider, or is it further down the line?
So we've been exploring. Obviously, you can't stick your head in the sand on the technology and the opportunities that are out there. We're going to be really careful about it, but we certainly, we've explored. We won a $1 million National Science Foundation grant with Brown University, which is here in Rhode Island, to explore, how we might integrate AI into the platform. And so that's been an ongoing study. We've worked with the AARPH Tech Collaborative on a similar. We just received a grant from Commerce RI. So we're using these funds to really explore, like, how would we do this and do it thoughtfully. So I'll tell you the one thing that is I've said as the sort of, this is the line we're not crossing, is that anything that we do has to improve or enhance the relationship between our product and the end user and not interfere with it, right? So, I don't see our cat specifically doing things like giving pill reminders, but it may be part of a larger ecosystem that is a more effective and interactive way that folks will make sure they have medication adherence. I don't have the answer to that yet, but it won't, because our cat's going to say, take your pills now, because cats don't do that, right? So that kind of breaks the golden rule of the realism part for me. But for sure, that's the roadmap, and we're going down, and we're not that far away. So
the temptation is to say it's a really fun product, but it's clear that it's actually a very inspirational product, and it's clearly delivering a lot to its users. So I'm really interested to see how it develops over the next couple of years. Ted Fischer, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate talking to you. All the best for the future.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having us, and really appreciate it.